everybody to our webinar on why selecting the right ISO 42001 AI governance platform matters. My name is Kevin Shawinski. I am the co-founder and CEO of Modulus. We are an AI governance platform company. We're based in Europe, and we've been working on AI governance and AI assurance for many, many years now, and we work with companies and governments around the world. And I'm joined today with a very special guest, Dallas Bischoff, the president of Process 360, who is a true expert on ISO 42001 and ISO management systems. So I feel really privileged to join this conversation with him. So to get us started, Dallas, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and it's delightful to be with you here today, although we're in completely different time zones, of course. So I sit on the SC42 committee as a voting member, but do a lot of things in the ISO world related to management systems, including I'm the U.S. Vice Chair for SC27, which does information security and privacy. And that's important for the purposes of this conversation because ISO 42001 does not attempt to secure an AI solution. It attempts to manage the AI domain. But anybody who's active in the marketplace realizes that there are issues with information security, and ISO tries not to have competitive standards. So it's not that ISO doesn't believe that 42001 needs information security. It does, but it doesn't attempt to actually interact with that. So there's lots of things that we'll be able to talk about related to that. For instance, the ISO 27090 standard is about to be released in a couple of weeks, which is specifically how to secure AI out of the 27000 series. And 27091 will probably be available in the fall, which is how to address privacy and stuff. So when Kevin identifies that I've got a background in ISO, it's pretty authoritative and robust. I'm pretty well plugged into that community. And 42001, I'll start out by saying, is absolutely the most complex ISO management system. There's a lot of things that people miss with that, including some of the governance platforms. And if the governance platforms aren't addressing those areas, it'll cause problems when you get through audit. And I am a qualified certification auditor for 42001. I'm one of the first folks trained in the United States on 42001. Kevin, shall we have some fun?
Yeah, this is going to be fascinating. And I hope the audience today joining us will find it informative, but also uh, we look forward to your questions. So Dallas and we're going to present a few slides, but really the heart of this webinar is to interact with you and answer your questions about this topic, which, now is becoming front and center for organizations who operate AI systems. So a brief agenda for what we're going to talk about today, why we are partners. So we can say a few words about that. What makes ISO 42001 challenging to implement? Dallas has the practical experience there. We do too. We actually helped the first ISO 42001 in Germany now over a year ago, which is a legal tech company, which on the tails of achieving their 42001 had massive success in the market because it gave them that trust signal to the market in the German legal market, very competitive, very conservative, to say we will treat this AI system we built, we'll treat it responsibly. And so finally, the question of why AI governance platforms for ISO 42001 are and have to be different. And it goes to what Dal said. 42001 is the most complex standard, and it doesn't neatly fit into the schema of other management systems as easily. And then, of course, if you're operating AI globally, you face the additional challenge of AI regulations, of course, the EU AI Act, but others as well. So let me just say a few words about why we partnered with Dallas and his company, Process 360, and then I hand it over to Dallas. So Modulus has always been a software company. We focused on what we know well, which is to build great AI software that is aligned with what regulations and technical standards expect. And we've always made the conscious decision to not move into adjacent fields, and in particular, not to go into advisory, primarily because there are already experts in the field that would be much better than us to deliver that service. And that's why we work with Dallas and his team. Dallas, over to you.
Well, thanks very much. So, you know, Kevin and I have had a relationship in this area for well over a year now, and we're very active in conversations back and forth about what's happening inside of the marketplace and the interpretation. For instance, we were just discussing the new changes to the Colorado AI Act and trying to keep up with that. So for us to be successful in the marketplace, both of us, um, having awareness of the fast-moving terrain in the AI space and how governance and risk and compliance are being addressed is constantly changing. And I'll say that in advance, one of the problems with a number of the GRC platforms out there is they simply do not, and that's representative of how the platforms are being managed. They don't keep up, and in certain cases, they don't attempt to even keep up with the changes in the regulatory environment, and that's going to minimize the business benefit and stuff that you've got. So, so Kevin and I have had a lot of synergy and stuff between us. Let's talk a little bit about why 42001 is so challenging for organizations. And I'll just sort of walk you through the standard at sort of a high level, starting with clause 4.1, which is deals with the context of the organization. Unlike any of the other management system standards, you have to identify which role you're in. And for a lot of clients that we work with, try to get them to understand the standard. And we've got large clients. I've got billion-dollar clients that are in the middle of 42001 implementations where we're either advising on them or they're designated internal auditors and we're trying to help them understand stuff. So you have an AI provider role, a producer role, there's an AI customer role, and then there's an AI partner role. And there are subcategories under that. And so you can read that in the standard. A lot of our clients do, but they don't understand the implications of selecting the roles or not selecting the roles. So here's a couple of different things that would be important to understand. A couple of weeks ago, I got contacted by one of the big US certification bodies. They literally ran into a case where the client identified their role. So they quoted the certification effort, the number of days and stuff associated with it, to find out that the client actually had more than one role. And the combination of those actually created gaps in evidence. And they were trying to figure out, could they even continue the certification effort at all because of a variety of other things. In ISO 42006, which is the audit certification guide for 42001 system, in the annex, it provides an audit table for basically calculating time. And if you have multiple roles, it significantly increases the time associated with that. So for the auditors to not cause a problem with your certification auditors, you'll need to understand that. Let me give you a case of the, well, pretty much the only other case where you'll see roles inside of an ISO management system would be in the 27701 privacy management standard. You have data controllers and you have data processors. And depending upon which roles you declare, it changes how you would do the implementation and it changes how you're audited. So coming back to 42001, when you look at the life cycle of AI, which is described in ISO 5338, from inception all the way to retiring the system, there are novel, completely different SDLC activities and software development or system development life cycles about how the system is managed and which controls in Annex A are applicable for you. So as a quick example, if you declared the AI customer role, there's portions of the SDLC you have no control over. You're literally going to buy a black box. And so the importance of third-party supply channel management and how you basically hold your vendors accountable and stuff would be very different than if you're going to create the solution. Then all the things about inception, about data management, data quality, in verification, validation, whether you're testing for bias, which doesn't happen in a traditional transactional system. So, and then later on, one of the other big differences, which catches companies off guard, because in audit and stuff, we frequently see that they want to use their pre-existing SDLC model, which doesn't actually account for some of the risks and the problems that you're going to run into, like in post-production. The concept that with machine learning, the system is constantly getting new data and it can change basically how it thinks about problems. You can have hallucinations. I'm sure that many of you have never heard the term hallucination with traditional data systems, but it's a real thing with AI. So those types of problems and stuff start right in the beginning on basically what type of AI role that you have. Next thing that's significantly different, you can identify in other management systems that would account for this, like 27001 for information security. You can have multiple systems inside of there, and that will help set the scope for the management system. But in 27001 or even in 27701 for privacy, you would generally see that there is a single risk assessment that's going to be conducted that addresses all of the systems. And in addition to that, you would then identify the set of controls in your risk treatment plan to be able to account for that. And in the case of 42001, the systems that you identify in inventory or that are going to be in scope can actually have different roles associated with them. And the roles can change the implementation so that when you get to the risk assessment, and there are notes in 42001, you may need a completely different risk assessment for each of the systems that you declare that are in scope. You can end up with completely different risk treatment plans, including insurance coverage on the AI systems. You can have more than one statement of applicability, which is a representation of controls that are associated with it. And the systems may require completely separate AI system impact assessments, noting that a system impact assessment is completely novel for 42001 that are associated with it. Let me go back to the risk treatment thing for a moment. One of the other problems that we're seeing that companies are just not used to is the insurance industry's now moved into a perspective that they believe that to cover AI, especially for a provider producer role, that you probably need a completely different insurance policy. And in audit, when we're asking companies about the roles and stuff, they don't know what the terms and conditions of their insurance policies are and could violate that. So then moving through the rest of it, how you're going to do monitoring and corrective actions and other things, and how you're going to integrate it with other solutions can be very different. And going back to the earlier point about AI 42001 doesn't know how to secure the system. For a lot of folks that are getting caught off guard, the auditors in stage one are required to ask what is the information security program that's protecting the system. That's a mandatory auditor question. There's no indication in 42001 that the auditors are going to ask you that question, and it has caught a couple of folks off guard. So why are the AI governance platforms different? A, because there's so many variables between roles, systems, how many statements of applicability you're going to have, and how you're going to do KPI monitoring on the systems and stuff are so radically different that a lot of the systems where the GRC platform has basically taken a rinse and repeat approach. We'll just repost all of the clauses because it's all the same. It's an ISO management system. Those platforms don't have the capability to capture the unique things that are necessary to actually successfully get through a 42001 certification. So there's a lot more of that we can basically share during the rest of the presentation. But I'll go through the process 360 years. So, it's really important that your organization understands what your GRC needs are. And again, depending upon what your role is and which regulatory environments that you're going to exist in, one of the really strong points, and I want to emphasize this with Modulus, is its ability to account for the regulatory marketplace. They're very good at maintaining awareness and product updates. So many of the other solutions that I see in the marketplace do not know and are completely confused by the EU AI Act. And if you happen to have a high-risk system, the wrong GRC platform could significantly expose you to fines and penalties that would be uncomfortable, let's say. So the market continues to evolve, and the GRC platforms need to adapt. A really good example of this would be the recent EU AI Act Omnibus, or the recent change in the Colorado AI Act. So as those things change, you need to understand the level of commitment with your GRC vendors that they'll maintain the products appropriately. And then understanding what the auditors are going to expect. And we can cover that a little bit more as we walk through stuff. And then how to achieve the efficiencies and maintain awareness. Management systems are not static. And frequently there's a couple of things that I talk with our clients about. One of them is that, for instance, that the auditors are asking themselves the question, when I walk out the door and come back a year from now and do a surveillance audit, do I believe that the organization's implementation has the ability to see the management system change, which I'll characterize as drift? The management system will drift. There are no perfect management systems. If they were perfect, you could get audited once and be done with it. But we know that the systems are going to change, and especially they get opportunities to mature and stuff. So the ability for you to use the GRC platform to identify efficiencies and maintain awareness and stuff are really important aspects. So I should probably pause here, and I'm going to pass it back over to Kevin. Kevin can talk about his areas on the slide.
Thank you, Dallas. So, basically, continue on some of the points you raised, and I'll later also show some screenshots on how we handle this. The first question is, how do you deal with a management system and then your obligations from regulations like the AI Act as an organization? And of course, for AI, there are things you do at the organization level. This is the management system itself. These are your policies. These are your organization-wide measures, and then you have your AI applications. And this is probably the first place where a lot of organizations start to stumble because they underestimate just how many AI systems they are providing, deploying, purchasing. Their employees simply started using without maybe your company knowing. So it's the famous shadow AI. And so our platform is designed from the beginning to have effective measures at both levels and to make sure, particularly your AI application list, your AI inventory is up to date. So we can bring in information from traditional IT security systems and capture forms to make sure that at all times you have a good overview of what your AI application catalog is. The second thing we spend a lot of time on, and this is something where we eat our own cooking, is we've built our own AI agent system. So there's an AI assistant called Scout, and Scout can coordinate and use a number of other agents that help you understand what you're doing, what you already have, what your gaps are at a highly autonomous level. And so, a question I get often, and actually I would like to put to Dallas, is in some organizations they say, "Oh, you don't need a platform. We're doing everything in some spreadsheets and some documents on a SharePoint because we only have a handful of AI systems." And I wonder or I question whether that's even feasible. Maybe it is. But if you're a modern company embracing and scaling AI, that conventional way of working is going to break, and this is what Scout's designed to facilitate. And
Yeah,
then
Kevin, I'm
yes.
just, I'll comment on that. One of the big problems that we see with organizations is they've got an AI governance program, and I'll characterize that may be well intended, but they have no idea what's running in the environment. And so because of that and the lack of visibility and stuff, it completely undermines their efforts. They're a long time ago, I worked with a guy that used to use the term that some of the clients have happy ears. They hear what they want to hear, but that's not necessarily reality. And so, if you get a competent AI auditor, and they're going to start asking you questions about things that you won't be able to answer. And so, if I go back up to the understanding what the auditors need, one of the big problems that organizations have is, they can identify what they think they want to have happen. That doesn't mean that that's what's happening. And more importantly, they can't evidence it. And that's one of the key things a GRC platform can help you understand. Do I have evidence and where is the evidence and stuff? Because you don't want to dynamically pull that out of your pocket in the middle of the audit. It's like attorneys asking questions, where nobody knows what the answer is going to be and they're just rolling the dice in court. That's sort of a bad idea. So anyway, Scout's a great product though in that regard. So. And then you were going to talk about quantitative risk management next, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. So we took a strong stand early on that the traditional 5 by 5 risk matrices um, don't actually help you nearly as much as they could and should in an effective risk management system. And I use that term carefully because, of course, ISO has a view on how risk management and particularly AI risk management should work. But of course, also now under the AI Act, we have not just a legal definition of AI risk management, we now have nearly final harmonized standards on how AI risk management should occur. And then we have in the US, we have the NIST AI risk management framework, which is also um, a way to deal with AI risk. And the way we try to unify that is by saying that all risk can and should be quantified, not necessarily because the amount of risk in currency in US dollars or euros or whatever is accurate, but it is much easier to productively disagree over it. So if I say the risk from prompt injection for this customer support AI assistant is $1 million, and you say, "Are you crazy? I think it's at most 200,000." Now we can have a productive disagreement of how did you get to your number? How did I get to my number? And we integrate that into the system and we estimate your AI risk based on your code, your logs, your cloud environment, um, and your custom risk taxonomy. That's another topic we could get into, and continuously calculates your risk exposure, which you can then present at board level and you can communicate organization wide. And also, you can then take to your insurance provider if you want to transfer some of the risk that you're taking on. You can show that you have an effective process in place to say, this is what our risk exposure is. It's down 20% since last quarter because of these effective measures and risk controls we've put in place.
And Kevin, you would agree that the insurance industry is now taking the position that if you're ISO 42001 certified, they will reduce your premiums because they believe that the implementation helps you both identify the risk and manage the risk more effectively than sort of the complete unknown with a lot of organizations. And I'll add on the risk management side. So, and I speak about this frequently. I think that AI looks a lot like uh, the state of cloud computing at about 2010. So, 15 years later, we've identified the different problems and challenges and figured out how to correct a lot of those. But in the 2010 time period, there were things that we couldn't do. For instance, you couldn't put healthcare data into a cloud environment. So even though AI starts back into the Dartmouth conference in 56, and Alan Turing is regarded as being the person who basically starts the general principles and concepts associated with it, the concept of governance with AI is relatively new. So lawsuits start to show up in about the 2004 time period. Modern governance starts to show up at about 2015. So we're still in a time period where the problems with AI are really technology maturity curve issues. We don't know what the problems are yet. We're still discovering those. And so risk management in the world of AI is still relatively in its infancy. You know, the NIST, and I'll prove that. So if you look at so ISO 23894 on risk management, the NIST AI RMF that's associated with it, the recent draft, because it's not even published yet, risk management publications are all done in the last 5 years. So it's not like we haven't seen problems and stuff emerge, but it's important for organizations to understand that the maturity curve of AI is going to be problematic in terms of risk management for a while. And just because you've got a risk assessment right now doesn't mean that it can't be improved on. And again, so risk assessments would be effectively what's the problem? Risk treatment is what are you going to do about the problem? And then you've got ongoing monitoring because risk is never going to change associated with it. I like to joke that risk is a four-letter word. That doesn't mean that it's good or bad. But it is a four-letter word, and just like hope and love has a positive connotation and stuff. But without a proper implementation of a risk treatment plan, whether you're going to use risk transfer for insurance or risk mitigation, which is effectively the AI controls, the Annex A controls are how you're going to achieve risk mitigation. And ultimately, you're trying to get to risk acceptance. So you're going to blend that together. Without taking that type of approach, you're going to end up relying on a completely different four-letter word called luck. So, and that's not how you want to manage the organization. So trying to be diligent about this and figure out stuff and realize that things are early. We've still got a maturity problem. It'll get better over time, but until then, we're going to get surprised from time to time, and that's just a reality.
So moving a little bit through what we prepared, are there any of the items here that you want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. So alignment with frameworks and the organization is adopting. There's different reasons why different organizations will move towards, for instance, the NIST AI risk management framework versus 42001 versus the regulatory requirements and stuff that show up. And so, first of all, you need to understand not why the salesperson that's talking to you can convince you that they have the best product on the platform or on the market. That may be true in an abstract sense, but that doesn't mean that it's the best product for you. And so, your organization needs to understand what frameworks are you subject to, both in governance, because there's different methodologies for that, in risk management, because there's different methodologies for that, and compliance, there's different requirements and stuff that are applicable. So make sure that you understand what are your drivers and then use that to try and consider which products are available out there. And there's some excellent solutions that address like ISO 27001 and stuff that do a great job in those areas, but they're not well adapted. And I would say the product managers don't understand 42001 and what they need to account for. So having a dashboard management capability. So one of the things with Modulus, for instance, it'll show you where you're at on your journey. So we've identified and addressed the following areas, but 75% of our requirements and stuff are not addressed. And one of the things that I've used Modulus for and talked with Kevin about, we use it actually instead of giving our clients a document, either a Word document or a PowerPoint slide deck that identifies all the things that are missing. We use Modulus and Scout to be able to identify where the deltas are, and the client automatically has a full dashboard that shows them exactly where they're at. So we sort of save the client a step where they don't have to take the PowerPoint slide deck and then put it into the GRC platform. We just load the data directly in there and use it as a representation to be able to communicate stuff. And providing an evidence repository and making sure that you understand that what you're going to represent. There's been so many times with clients over the years that in audit, I can basically tell, and I've been doing auditing for a long time, related to that, the management system is actually properly well formed, but they can't represent it. Like I had a huge medical client that I went through this exercise with, and she was very frustrated. She says, I know that we do these things, but I agree that we don't have a mechanism to evidence it. And the GRC platform gives you a common capability to be able to do that. Having the capabilities for workflow and automation can be really important. So, automatic triggers on, this policy is coming up for review. So you could do that inside of a GRC platform or use other capabilities. I've got clients that use some of the capabilities out of ServiceNow to be able to keep up with that. But there are even simpler solutions, even like Jira tickets and stuff, to be able to manage that. So the ability to increase your awareness and visibility, as I talked about before, the management system is going to drift over the course of time. And what the auditors want to know is when that happens, do you have the ability to see that? And in having a proper GRC platform, that's one of the ways that you can give the auditors confidence that you have mechanisms to actually raise the visibility so that when it does drift, that you can basically take appropriate action. This next topic uh, is not well understood between KRIs and KPIs. And so all of the ISO management systems require you to have KPIs in clause 9.1 and monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. You're required to figure out what are you going to monitor associated with it. But to the degree that you can have a platform that will also incorporate KRIs or key risk indicators would be highly valuable for you. And I'll take a moment and explain that. You should set your KPIs based upon risk tolerance so that if you're going to exceed your risk tolerance, that basically that's the trigger that tells you that management intervention is necessary. But because KPIs are lagging indicators, you're looking in the rearview mirror, it's telling you what happened in the past. You could actually exceed your risk tolerance and find out after the fact. So platforms that allow you to incorporate leading indicators or KRIs, which are projecting that if you do not change your trajectory, then you're going to go through your KPI floor and enter a point of effectively unacceptable risk inside of there. So, but a lot of the platforms out there they aren't really that risk centric, but all of the ISO management systems are completely risk-based in that regard. And then the ability to track issues and remediation. So, for nonconformities and corrective actions, those are effectively mini project plans on how to address different problems and stuff inside the system. And again, that's going to happen, and you need to be honest with yourself. I was doing a Fortune 500 client a couple of years ago, and we got into incident management, and I asked them for evidence of the incidents over the last 90 days. And their response was, we haven't had any. And what they were trying to characterize is, we run a really tight ship and stuff. But frankly, that's not realistic. And I had to tell them that, if you think that you've not had an incident in the last 90 days as a Fortune 500 client, you're not paying attention. And that calls into question the effectiveness of the controls and stuff. So those are some of the things that are benefits, but only if the features of the GRC platform can address those. And this isn't a magic list, as I would say. There are other areas, but I thought it was important to highlight some of these. So, right. But,
Fantastic, Dallas. Thank you so much.
yeah.
I'll briefly just go through those three key features on our platform that support operationalizing 42001. So we touched on those earlier. This is the split between what you need to do as an organization and what you need to do for each AI system. So to keep it simple, here is what it would look like if you're Modulus itself and you have one AI system, and we don't have just one. I simplified this here just to make the point, but you would have almost like a project at organization level to set up your ISO 42001 management system. And then for each AI system, now there's one, tomorrow there are 10, next quarter there are 100. All of those come with obligations that that system needs to fulfill as part of your management system. And this is what we facilitate at scale. This is the second part. This is Scout, and an example of one way to interact with Scout, which is directly in a chat interface. There are others. And I asked it here specifically about a particular control on the platform and what I would need to do about it in order to fulfill it. So this is at a very atomic level, that evidence question. Do I have evidence that I already do this? And if not, what would evidence look like and in the context of my organization? And this is what Scout can help you, and this is what Scout can reason over through integrations with where the evidence actually is, which is in your other systems, whether they're cloud providers, whether they're document systems, whether they're project management systems. And then the third part, and we talked a lot about risk, is this risk quantification process over time. And so here's an example from our development environment for Scout itself, where we are tracking over time the threat vector of backdoor attacks. And these values are calculated by our Fermi agent, and it is scheduled to do that regularly to tell us, how is the vulnerability, how's the risk exposure of the system to this particular threat over time. And you can schedule that to check it over time, plot it, and see how you're doing. And what we're seeing here as the risk slightly decreases is improvements to the system. So this is the result of our engineers and product managers improving Scout over time, and that being reflected here in a record, in that you can go back in history and see how that risk assessment, that risk quantification changed over time. And this we do at scale, right? This is for one threat vector for one AI system. Now imagine you have a risk taxonomy with 50 threat vectors or 100, and last quarter you just added another 20 AI systems. This becomes a problem that can only be solved with automation at scale, and that's what we've built. So we have covered the core of the webinar, and I now want to switch actually over to the audience and go for some of your questions. Do we have any audience questions?
There are a couple there inside the chat window, Kevin. So one of the individuals is asking about the use of platforms and whether SMEs with limited budgets and capability can figure out how to be able to scale with that and what they would recommend. Well, first of all, implementations of 42,001 are done against the Deming model of plan, do, check, act. And so you plan basically the implementation, get all of the pieces on the table and organize, and then you turn the management system on. That would be the do phase of Deming. And then you can let it run and generate evidence for at least 2 to 4 weeks, and then be able to audit it and have KPIs and stuff that would tell you what current state is. And then under Deming, then you could figure out, am I going to keep doing exactly what I'm doing? Is there ways that I can implement continuous improvement or other types of activities? So there is a roadmap type of approach that's sort of built into ISO to be able to address that. So Simona, I see that you've got a couple of other
Y-
questions posted.
Yeah,
So
there was another one before from Hang Tui. Did you see that in the chat?
yeah,
And then followed by another one, and then there are
yeah.
I
three.
think it's Mozam Vahid.
Right. And so the next one was comment is AI-driven GRC and compliance automation. How do you see AI governance platforms balancing automation with human oversight and accountability requirements? Kevin, I'll let you field that. I've got some thoughts, but I'll let you start.
Sure, and this is the key trade-off that you have to think about when you're designing for the problem of AI governance platforms and of course AI systems. And a lot of digital ink is spilled on what human oversight, human in the loop, human on the loop, etc., means. And um, I'd say if you want to reduce it to simple statements, is that in the end, you can't make the platform take the fall. In the end, the human is responsible. That's whether your AI systems harm your customers, they harm the public, they harm your employees, they harm your company. Ultimately, a human is responsible. And from that follows how you should think about where human intervention or human decision is required. The AI Act has this one of its key articles is called human oversight, and that's there for a reason. And so, in our approach to the problem, uh, we mark all AI output very clearly, and we make you as the user take ownership for it. So Scout can produce some text and it will be marked as AI generated until such time as you accept it and start editing it, and then you become responsible for it and it gets logged. And so all the important decisions that have consequence, have to be validated by a human. And this is exactly where you then think about the trade-off. How do you balance that with automation? And I would say this is the design problem. This is the product design problem of our age, and different industries will have to think differently about it and always go back to the original principle. Doesn't matter what you say. You cannot say, well, the AI did it. A human in the end is responsible.
Yeah, and ultimately, Kevin, I think that you would agree that while the AI solutions may improve your awareness, they can't fix the problems themselves. And, or I could say you shouldn't let them without a certain degree of oversight and confidence and stuff that's associated with it. And there'll be issues about like prioritization and other regulatory considerations that you'll have to deal with that the AI solution, well, here, Kevin, I think that you would agree that when the regulators walk in, I think what you're partially saying is you can't point at the AI solution and say it was the AI solution's fault.
That's
So,
exactly right.
yeah, and so you have to have involvement with the staff and stuff. So AI gives you the opportunity to do it better, but if you're not paying attention, it also gives you the capability to do it worse at the same time. So,
And the AI Act introduces the concepts of intended purpose and um, foreseeable misuse.
mm,
So those are very powerful, particularly for generative AI systems that could be used for all sorts of purposes. And so it's incumbent on you to think about what is my AI system actually supposed to be used for? And how could a user either accidentally or maliciously misuse the system? And you should think about that. You should think about the risks posed by that and do something about it. That is actually the core logic of the of what the Europeans are doing is think about how people might misuse your system and take reasonable measures to do something about it. And that's not too far away from what ISO expects you to do as well.
yeah. All right, so what do
Given,
we got for the next question here?
Simona, what other questions do we have from the audience?
Yeah, so ISO 42001 emphasizes continuous risk monitoring, so including bias drift, model performance, and incidents. So is this realistic with the manual processes, or does it effectively require tooling? And what you, Dallas's auditors, want to see as an evidence of all of this?
Okay, well, so first of all, the concept of continuous monitoring in the way that the US federal government uses it is very comprehensive. And ISO doesn't expect that. Actually, it tells the organizations figure out what you need to monitor and how you're going to do that. And that could be a comprehensive approach, but it doesn't necessarily have to. At the end of the day, with the auditors, what you have to be able to represent is you have visibility into the system, whether it's suitable, adequate, and effective. You'll find that language inside the standard. And that's basically what the auditors are trying to determine, is it suitable, adequate, and effective, and that you can demonstrate that. So here's a real simple thought pattern. If you can't demonstrate to me as the auditor that your system is suitable, adequate, and effective, how do you demonstrate it to yourself? And if you can't demonstrate it to yourself, that's what causes problems in the audit and stuff. And we're not trying as auditors. Here's kind of an epiphany for a lot of folks. The auditors are actually on your side. We actually want you to have a quality system that's protecting your organization. We don't like it when you have a train wreck. So a lot of times our engagements are fixed price. If you've got a really really good implementation and stuff, then we write very little. Takes us less time to actually do the audit, which increases our profitability. So, I'll say that we're on your side in that regard, but we're going to do our job. And if you've got a train wreck, we're going to basically document that, because that's part of the way that you get better also inside there. So make sure that you understand how you're going to evidence it, and in a way that before the morning of the audit, basically what the evidence is going to look like. You do not want to make up stuff on the fly. A really experienced auditor listens to how you represent stuff and draws conclusions about intonation in your voice, and the other things will change how we go about actually conducting the audit. One of my favorite jokes, which is just me expressing my sense of humor, but in reality, it's really true. The audits are like the first 10 minutes of a date. The auditor knows how it's going to go. He just basically has to go through the rest of the motions. But if we walk in and you're unorganized, you don't seem to know what you need to represent, the evidence isn't organized and stuff, then we start drawing conclusions because those are all indicators about how things are going to occur. So I think the second question down here, or the next one, is organizations must move towards agentic AI. Well, they don't have to, but they probably will. And I'll say that that's a hot mess. Talk about technology immaturity. So how you're doing like authentication and access control in some of those environments, it's going to get better. It'll be fabulous in the future. It can be really risky right now. So does it make sense to adopt a dedicated governance program to manage agents? AI comes in multiple flavors. Those flavors have different problems. So predictive AI versus Gen AI versus agent AI, which is not the same thing as agentic AI, all have different issues and problems to solve. Some of them are a little bit more mature already, but a number of the stuff with agentic looks like proof of concept. And the thing for me professionally that's sort of terrifying to watch is you've got companies out there that have got long-term legacy, high availability implementations with a lot of redundancy inside of them, and they want to replace it with an agentic system that does not have high availability failover architecture inside of it. So you'll have to be careful with that. So I think the next question is what realistic timeframes from kickoff to certification? Kevin, you want to take that? Or otherwise, you know that I can talk about this topic, but
You probably have a larger sample also from other ISO management systems. We've seen everything from companies that are incredibly organized and are ready very quickly. So this one company we did last year, they were so well organized that with Scout, with our platform, in about a month, they were ready for their auditor engagement. We're of course very proud to have helped them get there that fast, but I always caveat this with, yeah, the company was extremely well prepared. The CEO himself was heavily involved, and therefore it was a short process for them. Some other companies we work with, they take longer to get ready, mostly because they have a lot of AI systems to go through. And as they start the process of, yeah, we should probably work towards 42001, the most time-consuming task is finding all the AI systems and understanding what's going to be in their SOA or not.
yeah,
How do you
from
see it, Dallas?
Yeah, from my perspective, the fastest I've seen an ISO management system done has been about 3 months. 4 months would be quick, actually. With 42001, 6 months would be quick. And I've certainly seen organizations stretch it out to a year. The things that cause the delays in the implementation, and I'll characterize them as delays, is the 42001 faces them to deal with questions that they've not thought about. And frequently, for them to take the next step and move forward, they have to step back inside the organization and discuss how they're going to go about doing that, make sure that that clears basically privacy and security reviews. The general counsel signs off on it and everything else in terms of internal coordination. So we find when we're doing implementation support, we're frequently waiting for the clients to actually figure out what's the right answer in their case. The other things that cause basically an extended timeline, you have to put the management system in place before it can generate evidence. It has to run for a while before you can do the internal audit. Then after the internal audit, you're going to need to have a management review, and you're going to need corrective action plans for any things that are found. And you need to take care of all of those things before you get into the certification audit. So those are the things that sort of stretch things out. It's not that it can't be done faster. And as Kevin's pointed out, if you have an organization like he's referring to that knows what the questions and the answers are, they can move through it relatively quickly. But that's usually not the case. But coming back to the central theme of the webinar, the GRC platform, if it's the right platform for you, will help you see that picture, keep track of it. You'll be able to close your gaps and be able to get to a successful outcome then.
We've now spent almost an hour talking about this really fascinating topic, and to be honest, I almost lost track of time because it was interesting discussing this with you, Dallas. Um, we should end the webinar now, and I see there are still many unanswered questions, and so of course, both of us will be available. You can find us on LinkedIn, you can find our websites, and you can see our email addresses here. So if you have specific questions, please do reach out to us. Please do visit our websites. And if you're thinking about 42001 or any of the other ISO certifications, please do reach out to Dallas and his team. They really are extremely knowledgeable, and I've benefited certainly from talking to Dallas over the year. So thank you very much, and have a good start or end to the day, depending on where you are in the world.